big question.
Corruption is, in fact, is increasing more. We never had that snake and whether python and swallow more.
Why?
Everything has increased.
Conversational, controversial, and borderline disruptive. The big question.
Mondays to Fridays, 12:05 p.m.
On your women radio, WFM 91.7.
Good afternoon and welcome to The Big Question on Women Radio WFM 91.7. The Big Question is the program where we discuss and prefer solutions to issues affecting us as a nation and our citizens. The Big Question is broadcast on weekdays at 12:05 p.m. You can join the conversation by contributing or reacting to The Big Question. Call 07000 917 917 or send us a text and WhatsApp message on 0703 175 6537. You can also send us your contributions to our social media platforms on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. WFM 917. Log on to our website www.wfm917.com. Today on The Big Question, we will be having a conversation, and of course it centers on the 9 years after Chibok abduction, and that is what the conversation is centered on. 276 mostly Christian female students aged from 16 to 18 were kidnapped by the Islamic terrorist group Boko Haram from the government girls secondary school at the town of Chibok in Borno State, Nigeria, on the night of 14/15th of April 2014. Now, according to reports, the abducted girls were in attendance to take their final exams in physics. 57 managed to escape, mostly by jumping off the lorries and running off into the bushes. May 2016, it was reported that the first girl was found. A few others have also managed to escape over the years. Between 2016 and 2018, 103 of the victims were freed following negotiations between the Nigerian government and the militant. Further reports has indicated that the militant have recently been abandoning their remaining captives, partly due to an intense, multi-dimensional military campaign against them. Today, we will be discussing 9 years after the Chibok abduction. My guests today are human rights lawyer Emmanuel Ogebe. Good to have you on the show today, Emmanuel.
Thank you very much.
All right, and yes, we also have the National Network Coordinator, WANEP, Bridget, Osakwe, Usifo. Good to have you on the show today.
It's my pleasure to be here. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Bridget. Now, I would like us to start the conversation this way. It's been 9 years of, talking about Chibok girls. It's been 9 years and we still have about 96 girls. I don't want to call them girls anymore because as at now they are women, because their ages back then were within 13, 14, 15, 16. So if you add 9 to that, you have 24, 25, 26. So 9 years after, we still have about 96 girls or 96 women in the custody of Boko Haram. And if you ask parents, friends, and families of the Chibok girls, I am quite sure that April 14 is a day that can never be forgotten. So let me start with you, Emmanuel. Why is it important that we need to keep talking about this day?
Yes, well, the first thing that we should note is that the Chibok abductions is the longest running mass abduction in the world. Okay? So every day that these girls are not back continues to add to that unfortunate record. But I want to even emphasize that beyond the historicity of this crime, this continuing crime, is the emotional toll that the parents have to live with daily. One parent said, and I have never forgotten what he said, that they didn't just abduct girls, they abducted a generation.
Of course.
Now think about, all these hundreds of girls from Chibok, which is, the most Christian local government in Borno State, are gone. And then you have a situation where in the camps where they're giving birth to children for the terrorists. So the historical and generational impact on that community cannot be exaggerated. And this is why, this is very, very important.
All right, thank you very much for that one, Emmanuel. Bridget, what are your thoughts?
Lest we forget, from 1 year to 2 years, now we're at the 9th year. 9 horrendous years. Last year, we had a conversation on this same thing. I actually made a video for Women Radio. And so, I was going to continue counting years. I remember that we keep asking about, when you say remaining just 96, I wrote it down, 96. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 to 96. And then when you compare it and make it individual to one child of a family, even one child of a family is so much pain and agony. We are talking about 96 families that are still having hanging hopes for whether they are alive, whether they are still girls, whether they are still women, according to you, or they are now women, or they are now mothers, we do not know. So, for me, let's forget that we have obligations. We have a responsibility to protect our children. The children went to school to learn. And what did they do? And we failed them by not protecting them. This happened. We also failed them by not getting them out. And in part of the conversation, they said there were some negotiations, some were released. So,
what happened to the others?
Was there a kind of selection in the ones that were to be released and the ones that are not to be released? It's a very painful situation. And I think that the promises that our government hold, the government from the federal, from the state and the local level, the promises that they make, they must be accountable to those promises. They have a responsibility to protect, which they have failed. I think that they should live to their responsibility to protect us and bring these girls alive. And the second thing, and is on a happy note, that President Buhari has declared a state of emergency on SGBV in Nigeria. But what is our reality? How do you compare it to the capture or the yet to release Chibok girls? I think that the declaration of the state of emergency should be translated and reflected in our reality. And it is customary for when governments are moving on, are changing government, that they sign a lot of policies and laws. I am hoping that before May 29, this thing should not just be signed, because one of the promises that this government came with was that those girls were going to be released and that Boko Haram will be
a thing of the past.
A thing of the past within 3 months. And 8 years. I think that they should make do with their promises. And let us have our girls and other girls. For all you know, today we are talking about Chibok girls. Leah Sharibu is still there. And the one from Katsina and Zafara, they are there. Can we, as a people, can our government lead us rightly, by bringing all these girls before May 29. I will say a personal thank you to this government.
All right, thank you very much, Bridget, for your thoughts on that one. But I would like to ask you, are there possibilities that these girls are still alive?
My dear, I'm a very optimistic person, so I rather hold on to that hope that they are still alive. It might be slim, but I think I prefer to hold on to that hope that they are still alive. But whether they are alive as how they went there is a different conversation. Because after 9 years, they are definitely not the same people that went in. But I prefer to hold on to the hope that they are still alive. At least the majority of them.
All right. So thank you very much, Bridget, for that one. I had to ask you that because in recent time, you will agree with me that a lot of authorities have been so quiet about it. Even the last electoral campaign and all of that. So I don't, just like you rightly mentioned, in 2015, it was more like, okay, vote me in, I'll do this for you, I'll bring back these people and all of that. But hey, it's been last year election came and it looks like nobody mentioned the Chibok girls, and a lot of people have been really quiet about it, organizations, authorities. So that's why I actually asked you that question, that is there any possibility, are there chances that they are alive? All right, thank you very much for your thoughts once again on that one. Emmanuel, it's been 9 years. What do you think would have happened or may have happened to these girls since April 14 that they were kidnapped?
Yes. So clearly, whatever shape they went in as, they are not the same anymore. To underscore your point that they are no longer girls, that they become women. Let me point out that even here in Kano State, the Kano State government illegally took over some Christian students, children from an orphanage, and placed them in a state-run orphanage. And within the 2 years that those children have been in the state-run orphanage, they have lost their ability to speak English. They can only speak Hausa. So you can imagine that these are children in a city of Nigeria compared to women who were taken, or young girls who were taken into a forest where they are cut off from civilization. So mentally, educationally, physically, and emotionally, they are not the same as when they were taken. And we should never forget that fact. But there are two quick points I want to make here.
All right.
I want to, of course, address your concern as to whether they are alive. The evidence we have is overwhelming that most of them are alive. When the first girl came out in 2016, in May, Amina Ali, some of the evidence we got from her indicated that at least half a dozen of them have been killed or had died. Now, we have the names of those girls, and we asked the federal government at the time to disclose to the parents of the girls who were dead so that the parents could have closure.
Closure, of course.
And the government refused and failed to do that till date. Yesterday, speaking with community members, I was told that some of the parents, having not been notified by the government, but trusting the reports from the girls who came back, have proceeded to have private funeral services for them. So that's the situation that we have. Now, I should also point out that last year, a significant number of them came back. But, it wasn't really publicized for the benefit of the public. I understand that at least a dozen of them came back last year. And for me, as an expert who has dealt with this issue for years, I was only aware of 4 until yesterday. So if I, who is considered a global expert on the Chibok girls, was not aware, you can imagine that the general Nigerian public was not aware. But what we noticed about the way and manner in which these girls came back was that it was the state government that announced, supposedly weeks after they returned, that, oh, these girls came, we kept them quiet, and we're now returning them to their families.
Okay.
And we're wondering, a significant issue like this, why did we not hear about it immediately they returned? So for some reason, the government is keeping it secret
On the low.
as to how the girls are coming back.
All right, so thank you very much for that one. So is it safe to say that government is putting in efforts to rescue the remaining girls? Is it safe to say that? I mean, from what you just said now, is it safe to say that government is, putting in efforts to rescue the remaining girls?
Well, I will say two things about that. The first is that whether we like it or not, the government did succeed in negotiating the release of 103 girls. That we will have to give them credit for. But they left over 103 behind. So if we're to give them a score, a score, you would say that they scored less than 50%, which is a fail rate. Because Buhari himself said that the only success on the Chibok girls is if all of them are recovered. Having failed to recover over half of them, he cannot have, a pass score on this. Now, with regard to the girls who came out last year, most of them, from what we understand, fled on their own during aerial bombardment of the camps where they were. So, in other words, they played a role in their liberty.
Okay.
And the Nigerian government also played an accidental role, because when they were bombing those camps, they could not have known that the girls were there. But the girls seized the opportunity to come out. So we do commend our valiant troops for the efforts they made, but we still insist that since the Nigerian government successfully negotiated the release of 103 girls, they similarly have the capacity to negotiate the release of the remaining ones. And when we look at the case of Leah Sharibu, the same thing happened. The government successfully negotiated the release of all the Muslim girls who were taken, and then failed to obtain the release of Leah. So it is not a lack of capacity, but apparently a lack of political will to follow through. And that is why we continue to call on them to finish the job instead of abandoning halfway.
All right, so thank you very much for your thoughts, Emmanuel, for that one. 07000917917. That is the number to call to be a part of the conversation. Yes, 25 minutes gone past 12 from this side of the radio. If you are just joining us, you're listening to The Big Question. The Big Question on Women Radio is the program where we discuss and prefer solutions to issues affecting us as a nation and as citizens. The Big Question is broadcast on weekdays 12:05 p.m. You can join the conversation by either calling 07000 917 917 or send us a text on 0703 175 6537. Log on to our website www.wfm917.com. Download the mobile app WFM 917. My name is Blessing Agbeton, and my guests for today, I have human rights lawyer Emmanuel Ogebe and National Network Coordinator WANEP, Bridget Osakwe Usifo. And yes, we are speaking on 9 years after the Chibok abduction. Now, Bridget, I would like to ask you, because right after that of the Chibok girls, I mean, several other abductions were recorded. It's almost becoming the norm. We have the Ogebe boys. We have so many of them. Now, I want to ask you, this kidnapping, insecurity, what impact would it have on the schools, especially in the north? Because mothers, parents would be generally scared of, releasing their children to go to school because they don't know what is going to happen, what is going to be their fate. So what do you think is the impact of all of this on schools generally? What's the fate of the school after this incident?
Thank you so much, Esther.
Blessing.
Before I answer my own question. On the question whether the government have tried, my boss, Dr. Chukwemeka, usually say that effort is not equal to results. So, like Emmanuel have just said, the government has failed us. They might line up, they have tried to do that, they have tried to do this. But all these efforts are not equal to a result that our 96 young women are still missing. So, that is, the government's effort has not yielded the desired result. We're now coming to the impact of this abduction in schools. First of all, the first response is that people will be apprehensive to go into school. If we start from Borno, for instance, Borno had the list, according to the UNICEF report, in education enrollment for young children. And so, these parts of the country where do not have high education enrollment and where the education level is low are having these issues again. So a lot of people, I had a friend in Yobe that told me that, I said, how do you copy Yobe? He said, I no longer live in Yobe. I'm now in Abuja. That my children have to go to school. Because my children have to go to school. So, generally, parents are apprehensive to send their children to school. And what that means is that the level of school enrollment drops in all the areas, whether for girls or for boys. Children are children. And the child rights law is very effective on the protection of children. And so, when this fear, this apprehension about you do not know what will happen if your children go to school exists, a lot of people either are emigrating from that area. There's a lot of movement that are going on from that area for people to ensure that their children go to school. And for those that are going to schools with a lot of fear and apprehension. And it has even psychological impacts on the output of the children because they are afraid. They don't know what will happen. They don't know what can happen with the different dimensions and emerging dynamics that are coming up. But I must say that a lot of people are still emboldened to still send their children to school in those areas. But the fear is palpable.
All right. Thank you very much, Bridget, for your thoughts on the show today. So I'm just going to ask you, just before we wrap up on the show today, what can the government do to ensure that the current situation in Nigeria becomes a thing of the past? I will start with you, Emmanuel. What are the things that the government need to put in place to ensure that the current security situation in Nigeria, because just recently it was said that 80 children were kidnapped. I don't know how we will continue to wake up to all of these stories. It is devastating. So what can the government do better? What is it that the government can do better to ensure that the current situation, the current security situation in Nigeria becomes a thing of the past, especially bearing in mind that another government is coming in?
Yes, that's the thing, Blessing. Thank you very much for reminding us that just now, 80 school children were abducted within the past week. In addition, in Benue State, in the first week of April, 135 people, innocent people, were slaughtered by herdsmen in the space of 5 days. Since the elections, over 400 people killed in Benue. So the state of insecurity is as bad now as it was during the period of Chibok 9 years ago. In fact, the number of school children abducted, under this administration is more than the number that were taken during the Jonathan administration. One of the most shocking things was when we came to mark the anniversary of Leah Sharibu's abduction in February, we discovered that one of Leah's classmates who escaped that attack in 2018 was abducted this year in Bauchi, where she had moved to for safety. So as I speak to you now, on a weekly basis, I get reports of girls continuing to be abducted in northern Nigeria. And we're not talking about just the terrorists, because that is still happening. But we're talking about Muslim members of community who are emboldened by the impunity with which Boko Haram did what they did, to also kidnap their neighbors, their daughters, and marry them, forcefully convert them. So we have not had accountability for Chibok. Two things. One, the governor who mismanaged the Chibok situation against all advice, left them to be abducted, has been rewarded with the vice presidency of Nigeria. That is not the signal we should be sending to the world. And then secondly, in addition to that, one of the Boko Haram terrorists who was involved in the actual abduction was sentenced to 11 years imprisonment. And I said, how can, when the girls have not been returned, how can he be given a short period of time to stay? So he will finish his sentence and come out, and the girls will still be. How is that fair? So we need to have justice and accountability, and we need to protect children in schools right now.
All right, thank you very much for your thoughts. Bridget, what would you like to say? Hi, Bridget.
In addition to what Emmanuel has just said, we need to interrogate why the adoptions. Why are the kidnappings? Why do we have insecurity? And the questions that the government can answer, maybe the incoming government should look at the economic situation of this country. They should examine how did we arrive at a GDP that is so low. How do we arrive at a people who have become so vulnerable in all ways? And I think again that it is not everything that should be politicized. When you make laws to protect children, you politicize it and turn it into. I think that should work on the issues and separate issues of politics from safeguarding, especially in educational environment.
All right.
And lastly,
okay,
I think that we should have a social security structure that will guarantee human security in Nigeria.
All right, thank you very, very much, Bridget, for your thoughts on the show today. Special thanks to my guests, human rights lawyer Emmanuel Ogebe, National Network Coordinator WANEP, Bridget Osakwe Usifo. Thank you very much for being a part of the conversation. Do well to enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Nigeria definitely has an obligation to implement safeguards to protect all children. And the lack of accountability for these callous crimes is fueling impunity. The Nigerian authorities must carry out a credible investigation into the security failures that left children vulnerable to the atrocities committed by Boko Haram and gunmen. Thank you very much for sticking with me on the show today. I really do appreciate you. The big question will be back next week, Monday. Special thanks to my guest, human rights lawyer Emmanuel Ogebe, National Network and Coordinator WANEP, Bridget Osakwe Usifo, and to you for being a part of the big question. Thanks to the producer, Amarachi. Thank you very much for for your support. And yes, the executive producer, Tom Okewale Shunaya, I say thank you. The Big Question is a program where we discuss and prefer solutions to issues affecting us as a nation and as citizens. Remember that conversations like this don't usually end here. We must continue to raise awareness on issues, continue to speak about the problem, and most importantly, prefer solutions. Remember to continue to be a patriotic Nigerian everywhere and wherever you find yourself. My name is Blessing Agbe. Good afternoon.
WFM 91.7.